Night begins not as an ending but as a threshold. A soft edge where the day loosens its grip and the air turns weightless. In this gentle turning a traveler appears. A soul with tired hands and a mind cluttered with shelves of unfinished lists. Who sits upon the quiet shore between waking and sleeping, and listens to the hush that gathers under the ribs like moonlight collecting in a shallow bowl. The traveler closes their eyes and hears the slow tide of breath. The body remembering how to be a harbor. And in that harbor a single lantern rises from the dark like a carefully held thought. Its flame small, steady, and patient, waiting to be noticed. The traveler, with a curiosity almost too shy to name, reaches toward it. And finds that the lantern is warm without heat, bright without glare. When cupped in the hands it hums a note so low it could be mistaken for silence. A note that loosens the knots of worry and invites a long exhale. That tastes faintly of wild honey and clean rain. As the traveler breathes out, the world around them changes with the unshowy certainty of a seed becoming a stem beneath the soil. Because the shore between waking and sleeping is a gate. And the lantern is a key. Keys know the doors even when we forget them. So stones smooth into steps, and steps become a path that slopes gently downward into a valley that was not on any map the traveler carried. A valley made of dusk and memory and something older than both. Where grasses murmur in a language the feet understand. Where distant water keeps time like a heartbeat. And where the sky keeps its stars inside the leaves the way a tree keeps birds inside its singing. The traveler follows the lantern and discovers that the path curves as if it is remembering the body's wish to move without rushing. With each curve there is a soft unveiling. A hollow tree whose trunk tastes of cedar when the traveler lays a palm against it. Whose rings whisper the numbers of forgotten birthdays. A stone that, when lifted, reveals a sleeping beetle with a shield like a dropped bead of night. A pond that reflects not a face but a feeling. The precise weight of first snowfall on an open tongue. The traveler, who has not trusted such small astonishments in some time, begins to trust them now. Because trust is a muscle that strengthens quietly when used. Soon the path opens onto a meadow that seems to exhale in the traveler's direction. Crisp and bright, with dew-like scattered syllables across the grass. At the meadow's center stands a bell on a wooden frame. The kind rung not to summon but to bless. Beside it a figure no taller than the traveler's shoulder. Neither child nor elder but something keen and ageless. Wearing a coat the color of early dawn and boots the color of good soil. This figure carries a bundle of reeds tied with a strand of river hair. And smiles with the exact patience of lantern light. The traveler would ask a question but the figure lifts a finger to the lips. Not to hush but to invite listening. Then strikes the bell with the reeds. The sound that unfurls is not metal on wood but the echo of a promise made to oneself long ago and kept in the pocket like a folded note. When the sound settles in the grass the figure nods toward the traveler's lantern. And says, not with words but with the meanings that words usually carry, that it is time to walk and remember. Time to wander with a mind like open hands. Time to let the world reintroduce itself without needing to prove that it matters. So they set out together, the traveler and the dawn-coated guide. Through a corridor of willow branches that sweep the tops of their heads like a blessing. Over a creek that giggles in its sleep. Across a field where moths drift like forgiving thoughts. With each step the traveler notices that the lantern grows lighter until it is not carried but companioned. A small sun that keeps company without asserting itself. And in that ease the body finds its older posture. The one held by children who have not yet learned to make their shoulders a prayer for burdens they do not need to carry. They come to a house made of shoreline. Its roof a gentle curve of shells and its door a clouded pane of sea glass. Upon the door is a brass handle shaped like a question mark so that to open it is already to be curious. Inside the house there is not furniture but weather. Delicate arrangements of wind and temperature and smell that place the traveler inside remembered rooms. A kitchen where warmth rises from a loaf of bread shaped like an oar. A hallway with a rug that remembers every footfall as a story rather than a stain. A tucked-away corner where dust motes stir themselves into constellations if looked at kindly. The guide gestures toward a circular window and it fogs with the traveler's breath. Upon that fog another meadow writes itself. This one from years the traveler has not visited in a long time. A meadow of the mind where they once laid on their back and declared clouds to be creatures. A meadow where the grass had the exact smell of green apples peeling themselves. A meadow where somewhere beyond the hill a dog was laughing the way dogs do. As the scene clarifies, the traveler finds that their chest has shifted from a locked drawer to an open terrace. And that on the terrace small pots of thyme and rosemary and stories are growing. The guide's hand, smelling faintly of river stone, rests briefly on the traveler's shoulder. And they continue, arriving at last at a bridge made of everything gently held. Strands of hair saved from haircuts. The bright ribbon once tied around a gift. A shoelace from the first pair of shoes chosen for running and not for arriving. The bridge arches across a river whose surface is a map of the night. A map not of places but of questions that shimmer and then, when gently asked, answer themselves by turning into new questions. Generous ones that do not corner but invite. Halfway across the bridge the guide pauses and listens to the river as if it is reminding him of something forgotten on purpose. Then speaks out loud in a voice whose timbre is the quiet between two waves. All journeys of wonder are marriages of patience and attention. The guide says, and attention is love wearing boots. And patience is love wearing a shawl. And you, traveler, have worn only armor for a while. Which kept you warm but hid your feet from the moss and your shoulders from the sky. The traveler recognizes that this is true. Not the way an opinion is true, but the way walking is truly walking when the ground is felt. When they reach the far bank the lantern flares once. A small sun saying here we are. They step into a grove of trees whose leaves are silver on one side and green on the other. So that as the breeze turns them the trees appear to breathe. Among the trunks stand small doorways at knee height, each with a knocker shaped like a brimming cup. When the traveler kneels and knocks upon one, the door opens onto a single image that lifts from the threshold like steam. A night of fever watched over by a steady hand and a bowl of water. A paper kite stitched to the wind with thread thin as laughter. The first time the traveler learned a long word and wore it proudly. As if a new street had been added to the city inside them. Door by door, image by image, the traveler bares their teeth not in fear but in the strange grin that happens when something lost is offered back and found to still fit. The guide watches with the softness of someone who knows their presence is both essential and nearly invisible. Because sometimes the bravest thing a companion can do is to be there without taking up the story. In the deepest part of the grove the ground tilts downward and becomes a slope of moss. The moss becomes a stair. And the stair becomes a spiral that curves like a seashell toward a quiet that tastes of snow. At the spiral's center sits a pool neither large nor small, cupped by stones smoothed by hands that never learned to be cruel. The pool is not water but a kind of time held without hurry. Leaning over it the traveler sees not their reflection but their body as a house with windows that open and windows that have been painted shut. The guide kneels and, with the reed bundle, taps the pool 3 times. With each tap a window lifts. With each lifting a draught of wind slips through the traveler's bones and clears a cobweb. The cobweb becomes a string and the string becomes a kite again. Rising, tugging with a firm joy. In that moment the traveler feels the first true ache of returning. Not from place to place but from forgetting to remembering. It is so gentle an ache that it feels like a smile learned from the inside. When they stand, the spiral unwinds itself into a path. The path becomes a field. And the field becomes a sky where 1,000 small lanterns hover. Pausing like fireflies considering a kiss. Those lanterns are the questions from the river that have become stars. And the stars arrange themselves into animals and instruments and untranslatable verbs. The traveler understands none of it and all of it at once. Which is the best kind of understanding for a dreamlike world that refuses to be smaller than a person's need to explain it. The guide turns to the traveler and lifts from their coat pocket a thin book tied shut with a green thread. To untie it the traveler need only remember the feeling of sitting on a floor cross-legged without being told to. When the thread loosens the book opens to reveal not words but spaces for breath. Spaces for astonishment. Spaces shaped like the long pauses between a storyteller's phrases when everyone leans closer because the silence is delicious. The guide shows the traveler how to read the book by breathing into it and then listening as the breath returns not emptied but enriched by all it has touched. When the traveler breathes into the first page, the air comes back carrying the taste of rain on chalk and the sound of a swing creaking at dusk. It places these offerings gently into the traveler's chest as if setting a table inside them. Saying, "Eat, eat." They walk again, and the valley folds itself into another valley with the easy elegance of cloth being laid over a table. Here there are markets without merchants and gifts without price. Small stalls of silence where one can try on different kinds to see which fits. There is silence for mending, silence for planting, silence for forgiving. Silence for saying "I am sorry" without the stickiness of shame. The traveler tries them as one tries scarves in winter, and chooses one that drapes across the shoulders like a cloak woven from riverbed light. In the next square, a woman-shaped wind teaches a child-shaped fern how to bow without losing its height. A dog-shaped cloud studies the ground the way thinking studies a possibility. Through it all the guide moves with the unremarkable grace of someone doing exactly what they were made to do, which is to accompany, to witness, to keep the bell's note sounding even after the bell has been put away. They reach a hill slick with clover and accordioned with small stones. Upon the hill an arch stands, not imposing but inevitable, made of driftwood and thunderheads and the fence posts of half-remembered summers. Beyond the arch there is a library open to the sky, its shelves made of patience and its books bound with weather. Each book is a story told by the world to itself about itself, which is just another way of saying that every living thing here has written a chapter. When the traveler lifts down a book the size and weight of a long afternoon, the cover shivers and becomes a doorway into a memory not personal but communal. A chorus of crickets practicing the art of shared timing. A school of small fish learning the letter that follows quiet. A sapling discovering how to hold the wind as if it were a bird that likes to perch in leaves. The traveler listens, and in listening feels their heart loosen further. The way a hand warms when placed near another hand that does not need anything from it. When at last the guide touches the traveler's elbow, they understand it is time to step past the arch into a heath where the air tastes faintly of sleep. There a circle of low stones keeps company with a low fire that has been burning for as long as fires have had the idea of comfort. Around the stones sit beings who have the look of elders and infants at once. Eyes furrowed and bright, whose faces are composed not of features but of seasons. They tilt their heads as the traveler approaches and the tilt says welcome not to this place but to your own willingness to be in it. They make a gesture that becomes a cup and in the cup there is light and in the light there is a tiny boat. They give the boat to the traveler and say with the music of their gaze that the boat is for crossing something that looks like water but is actually nothing more or less than the part of a person that has learned to run before deciding where to. The traveler carries the boat as one carries a sleeping bird and follows the guide to the shore of a lake smooth as a sentence that knows it needs no comma. This lake, the guide whispers with eyes alone, is made from sky that has decided to lie down. When the boat is placed upon it, the boat begins to move with a confidence that feels like permission. The traveler climbs in and the guide climbs in. The oars are made of time that refuses to hurry. Each pull draws them farther from the familiar and nearer to the tender. In the middle of the lake the water grows so still that it begins to remember its original clarity. In that clarity the traveler sees below them an orchard upside down. Each tree a chandelier of roots, each fruit a bell. As the boat glides overhead the bells ring softly and what they ring is the traveler's true name, which is not a word but a chord made of all the places where kindness touched and was touched back. The traveler, recognizing the chord without needing to understand it, cries a little the way dew cries in the morning. The crying washes nothing away because nothing needs washing, it only waters the part of the traveler that had gone quiet from thirst. At the far shore the guide helps the traveler ashore. The ground is the kind that makes one want to kneel because a small miracle is taking place. Kneeling is not submission but participation. The miracle is that a door is growing where no wall is. A door the traveler can carry without carrying. A door that will open in any direction when approached with wonder. This door is made from the same wood as the question mark handle on the sea glass house. Which means curiosity is the carpenter here. The guide shows how to hang the door not on hinges but on breath. so that every inhale opens something and every exhale lets something open. There in the heath a wind shaped like a lullaby combs the grasses and slips into the traveler's hair. It tells them a story about a day yet to come when they will be asked to teach someone how to trust the small astonishments again. The traveler knows suddenly that teaching is just another word for remembering out loud. And that remembering is a kind of agriculture. And that gentle attention is the best soil for any seed. The lake, humming beneath the night like a satisfied animal, agrees. The guide begins to lead them back, though there is no sense of leaving, only of deepening. Because the valley is generous and does not live by doors alone. The path they take is not the path they came by. Because wonder loves variety the way bees love a well-tended garden. So they pass through a village carved from the hollow inside a hill where windows are circles of amber. Inside each one a person sits in the last moment before sleep. The traveler sees that each person keeps beside their bed a small bowl of stars. Into this bowl they place one worry and one wish. By morning the worry has taught the wish how to grow legs. And the wish has taught the worry how to sit. The traveler smiles because the trade is so fair. From there they climb a staircase of air and arrive on a terrace of sky. Where nothing is lattice or railing except the slow course of clouds. On this terrace a quiet procession moves, carrying objects that first appear to be tools but are actually memories disguised as something useful. The procession stops as the traveler passes and offers them one, a wooden plane that shaves away not wood but the thin, dull layer from the day, leaving its grain brighter. The traveler takes it and feels a small relief in the wrist where so much tightening had been stored. They descend again into a garden where night-blooming flowers practice the art of fragrant timing and moths serve as docents. The guide pauses to point at a single bloom whose petals are the exact curve of a crescent moon. And says, with a tilt of the head that translates easily, that this flower opens when someone anywhere allows themselves to be surprised by kindness. As if answering a prompt, the flower opens wider. Beyond the garden a slope leads to a door cut into the root of a mountain. Within the door a hall shaped like listening extends. Its floor a polished river stone path and its ceiling a hush large enough to fit a lost choir. As the traveler's footsteps enter the hall they make no sound because the hall remembers every footfall before it and has learned how to hold them all without clatter. At the hall's center a low table waits upon which sit 4 objects. A candle, a spool of thread, a key with a hole shaped like a teardrop, and a small bell. The guide gestures toward the table with the kind of ceremony that asks nothing and offers everything. The candle is for warmth without urgency. The thread for mending without questions. The key for rooms the traveler closed without meaning to. And the bell for calling back small parts of the self that wandered too far and got shy about returning. The traveler lights the candle from the lantern now burning like a friend's laugh. Ties the thread around their wrist gently so its presence will be felt without restraint. Hides the key in the place where instinct keeps sunscreen. And lifts the bell. When it rings not out into the hall but inward. Into the cupboards and attics and nests inside the traveler where the childlike faith lived and waited with the patience of a stone learning the alphabet of rain. In that ringing small feet patter home along the corridors of the traveler's ribs and lie down singing simple songs whose rhymes were always the right size. The guide bows, and in that bow a doorway opens in the air leading not away from here but back to the shore where the traveler sat when the lantern first rose. Though the valley is not finished with them and they are not finished with the valley, both understand that leaving and arriving are simply waves exchanging the shoreline. So they step through and find the familiar room changed only by the traveler's changed seeing. A cup left on a table now dear as a moon cradled by the lip of a hill. The hum of the refrigerator a meadow of bees. The coat on the chair a small animal sleeping without fear. They set the lantern down and it does not go out because it is not a lamp but a habit. Habits that are kind to the soul are shy but persistent. The traveler sits and feels that their breath has become competent at blessing. With that competence there comes a thought that is less thought than invitation. Tomorrow, and all the tomorrows that follow, will carry their own tides. Their own chalky rains and small astonishments. And the traveler will be someone who notices them. This noticing will change nothing and everything. The way the same song heard unthinkingly becomes a prayer when the ears are ready. Yet sleep has not come, not quite, because the valley has one more kindness to press into the traveler's palm before the door swings softly closed. As the traveler reclines, the room grows gently transparent and the ceiling remembers it is a sky. In that sky floats a theater made of wind chimes and swallows' paths. Within the theater a story begins. A story that does not need a plot in order to be a journey. Because the map is made of feeling and the destination has always been a home that fits. The story is told in 4 movements, though no lines divide them except the comfortable hinge of breath. In the first movement, a child with pockets full of Tide glass teaches a grown soul how to count by textures and not by numbers. 1 for the smooth green that once knew storms. 2 for the frosted blue that has no sharpness left. 3 for the milky white that came from something broken that now gives light back the way snow does. The counting continues until the pockets are empty and the hands are full and it is suddenly enough. The second movement arrives like a drift of pollen and describes not with language but with warmth the exact moment a bird takes the first hop that is almost flight. Everyone watching understands that the hop is the point, that the air catches the bold and the tentative both. And the grown soul laughs because this knowledge is a small mischievous animal and it has climbed into their lap. The third movement is a river learning to braid itself around stones rather than argue with them. The fourth is the arrival of morning in a village that can only be reached by listening. Where shutters open not to verify weather but to greet it. Where each inhabitant carries a spoon because every hour might be soup. In this village the traveler sees a reflection of the life waiting to be lived with a loosened jaw and an unclenched fist. The traveler's body settles more deeply into the bed that now feels like an instrument built to play the song of rest well. The guide, who is also the lantern and the bell and the door and the gentle book of breath, sits on the edge of the traveler's sight where dreams shimmer. And says in the soft grammar of presence that tomorrow there will be ordinary tasks and they will be holy by virtue of being done with attention. Washing a cup can be a small baptism if the water is greeted with gratitude. Tying a shoe is a knot that holds together more than laces. Opening a window in a stale room is a liturgy for air. The traveler smiles without moving and the smile does the moving for them. Loosening the tight corners of thought. Drifting now, the traveler notices how the hum of the night has sorted itself into a choir. Distant cars, the bass notes. The whisper of curtains, the altos. The slow pulse of the house, the tenors. Their own breathing, the conductor who keeps time not with a baton but with mercy. They feel the measurable and the immeasurable shake hands. No one asks for a receipt because trust has finally come to the table and taken a seat. In the space where thoughts usually queue up and argue for importance, there is instead a field of tall grass and a wind through it. The wind says what winds say when they are not busy scattering hats, which is go easy. The grass says what grasses say when they have not been mowed into compliance, which is grow as you were meant to. The traveler says nothing because they are too busy being said to by a world that remembers their original name. Somewhere in that soft descent a memory arrives wearing new clothes. The memory of standing at a window at an age whose number is now difficult to fetch. Watching rain run its own rivers down the glass, making estuaries at the sill. The child who stood then and the grown soul who lies now both feel the same wordless permission. To wonder without earning it. To ask without the obligation of answers. To believe with the simple handhold of breath. Sleep gathers, not from above as a curtain but from within as a tide. Rising until it fills the lungs with weightless depth. At its crest the valley kisses the traveler's forehead with a leaf and a goodbye that is also a see you soon. Because wonder is not a country visited once but a citizenship renewed by noticing. The traveler, already half dreaming inside the dream, accepts the terms with the ease of someone who recognizes a homecoming. The last thing they hear before the soft room becomes the inside of a shell is the guide's unspoken blessing. May your resting be an orchard planted in the hours so that when you walk among tomorrow you will have fruit to eat and shade to share and a ladder to lend to those who cannot reach what is sweet. Morning eventually arrives not with trumpets but with the small creak of light finding a gap in the blind. The traveler wakes inside a body that fits more kindly. The gentle book of breath still on the bedside table though no one placed it there. The spool of thread around the wrist a soft reminder. The bells echo a warmth under the tongue. From the kitchen the kettle speaks in its old dialect and the traveler hears a friend. While the water warms they notice how their hands enjoy making a cup. How their feet enjoy meeting the floor. How their shoulders enjoy not being asked to carry the history of mountains. This noticing is already a prayer said without kneeling. Outside, the day is ordinary the way bread is ordinary until someone hungry blesses it. The traveler steps into it with the lantern now quietly part of their gaze. And the world cooperates with this gaze by showing its pockets of goodness. A neighbor's shy wave that is actually a ribbon across an unseen finish line. A stray feather that has the architecture of a cathedral. A patch of cracked pavement where a brave dandelion changes the city's mind about what belongs. The traveler, who once measured time in alarms and appointments, now measures it in kindnesses both given and received. The measurements are so exact that they become approximate. And in this looseness life holds better. Though no music plays there is a rhythm to the day that recalls the bell and its reed bundle. The way meaning can be invited but not forced. The way silence can be asked to sit and will. The way another person's sorrow can be given a cup of water and an unhurried chair and in that simple receiving find it can breathe again. When the traveler passes a playground in the late afternoon the sounds of spinning and calling and falling and getting back up wash over them like a weather they had forgotten they missed. Their heart makes, without their permission, a small vow to the air that none of this will be written off as background. That it will be considered primary. That the arithmetic of joy will be learned and taught in equal portion. And no one will be tested on it, but everyone will be surprised by how well they remember. The sun stoops, the street lights consider their own stars. Fatigue arrives not as a theft but as a friend who knows the house well. Taking off shoes in the hallway. Placing keys in the bowl that waits like a patient planet. The traveler returns to the bed that has become a boat that remembers lakes that remember skies. Before sleep they lift the small bell and ring it once. Trust arrives the way geese arrive in a ragged chevron. With trust comes the guide, sitting again where sight meets dream. Wearing still the coat of early dawn and the boots of good soil. Nodding as if to say yes, yes, this is the way of it, again and again, gently and for as long as you have a breath to lend to the book and a hand to hold a lantern and a kindness to place somewhere like a seed. The traveler, who by now trusts silence more than instruction, closes their eyes. Which is to say opens the door hung on breath. Which is to say steps through to find that the valley is already here. That the childlike faith waits not in a far country but at the small table where morning sets out its quiet feast. That wonder is not fireworks but embers tended well. And that the most astonishing magic of all is how the ordinary keeps agreeing to glow when looked at with steady, open, grateful eyes.